you, the Messiah. No offense, Perdre, but that has got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Why not me?
Have you met yourself? Perdre, you drink, you fight, you like to break people's arms just to hear the sounds they make.
Howdy, pilgrims, and thanks for tuning in to the last episode of Preacher versus Preacher. This was a comparison companion where each week we would get together and not only recap AMC's series Preacher, but so we would try to directly compare it to the 1990s comics it's based on by Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon. Who were we? Well, I was Bill Sweeney this whole time. Your through line for 4 seasons of this podcast. The last known survivor, as they say in that song. And joining me to recap the finale this week is a good old friend. You've heard him a few times this season, I think, or at least once. I'm not good with the math. That includes counting. And you might know him from agentpalmer.com. You might know him because now he too has a podcast called The Palmer Files, of which I was very lucky and honored to be the first guest. So people should check that out to hear me talk about something other than Preacher. His name is Jason Stershik, but he goes by Agent Palmer. Yes, that's right. I gave out his government name.
Well, you must have listened to like the most recent podcast digest where we spent some time discussing the fact that at least on that show, I will be known as Jason from there on out. And Dan was so good. Like after we had the discussion, he's like, "So what do you think about that, Jason?" And then a little bit later, "So Jason," and then at the end, he's like, "So what do you think about that, Paul?" Oh. It's gonna be an adjustment.
It really is. It really is. So if you haven't pieced that together and you don't know him, it's just the fact that, he's coming out from behind his moniker a little bit more these days. So we're all adjusting to it. You know, it's, I guess it's kind of like if you only knew Engelbert Humperdinck as Engelbert, then had to get used to saying his real name.
I mean, Baba Booey's first name is Gary.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I wouldn't be able to turn that off after a while. Like, you know, we'd be at meetings or family functions or something, and I'd be like, "Yo, Baba Booey." Oh, I'm sorry. I know it's in front of your family. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I could be Palmer over here. You know?
That's true. That's true. We're gonna stick with that because that's probably what's gonna roll off my tongue anyway. But folks, seriously, go check out the Palmer Files. It's a new podcast, just a couple episodes in. Go check it out, and subscribe and all that good stuff. And stay subscribed to this podcast for a little while. You never know what might pop up in the feed for this. It's not going to hurt you to leave it subscribed on your player, even if you think like you'll never hear from me again. Because guess what, kids? That's not true. What were you going to say?
Bill will let you know when it's time to unsubscribe from this feed. It's possible there'll be. I just imagine like a reckoning, like 4 months from now. Bill's like, "All right, let's do this. I feel slightly different about the show with 4 months of space in between," or something. Like, just.
Yeah, I don't know that this is the kind of podcast that like has to reinvent itself and say, "Okay, now what do we do?" Necessarily. Over here on this feed. Some feeds do that. Some recap shows do that. Like they just kind of switch it all over to another show, change their name and their listings and all that good stuff. And this way they don't really lose anybody. But I'm not really worried about that because Wicked Theory is coming back. Yes, that's right.
Still my heart.
Yes, it's coming back. I'm not exactly sure what form. But it's coming back. October. Keep your eyes peeled. I will tweet out from this account as well to let people know, anybody who's interested. Fans of what that show used to be may not really recognize it. I don't know. It's a little bit of a mystery. It's a little bit of a wait and see on what happens with the Wicked Theory podcast. Subscribe now. Get ahead of the curve.
Or resubscribe now. In the event that you unsubscribed because, well,
Look, we're not pointing. Look, we're not
quiet.
I'm not pointing fingers. You know, it got a little quiet. I understand. You know, so did this account, but this is like a seasonal account, so that made sense. Yeah, so that's coming back. The slate is cleared. I have some time again to kind of refocus some energies. This show is obviously going away for what it's worth. So, you know, the calendar and schedule and all that stuff is opening back up. Kind of excited. Exciting times. Can you feel it, Palmer?
I actually can. I'm really... For those listening right now, tweet at Wicked Theory and hold him accountable, because I call him... I do it behind the scenes, right? But somebody's got to do it publicly, and I don't want to do it publicly and behind the scenes. That feels like too much.
Guilt is a good motivator for me. I will say that. Guilt has always tended. I will get stuff done better over guilt than my own needs and
Bill, how
wants.
Jewish are you?
In spirit, my friend. I'm from New York. You know, I live in the melting pot, and that means everybody's all mixed up. You know, everybody sounds like they're Italian, no matter what household they grew up in. Right? I mean, you can tell a New York City Jew from an L.A. Jew. You can tell a New York City black guy from an L.A. or, like, you know, Atlanta black guy. Everybody sounds a little like, oh, what the fuck? You know what I mean? It's a little bit of that sometimes. All right, so let's get into this. All right, enough dilly-dally.
Sure.
We have a finale to get to. And,
it's over.
And celebrate. How do you, generally speaking, how do you feel coming out of it?
It's... So I felt much better before I went and picked up the last book. So, like, I knew, like, there were some things I remembered and there were some things from the books I was fuzzy on. And I watched it and I was like, all right, let me go pick up the book. And then I was flipping through the book and I was like, I know they completely skipped a whole bunch of storylines. But then I'm like, just skipping through the end of the book and I'm like, wow, I'm not sure how I feel about that, which is fine, because looking at the book and not knowing how I feel about it is pretty much the same as when they fast forwarded. I mean, this skips a bit, but like when they fast forward 65 years to get to Cassidy talking to Jesse and Tulip's kid.
It's just 40.
I was also like, wait, what?
It was only 40.
Oh, that was only 40?
Yeah. But still.
I still don't, like, it's been a couple, you know, I've had a beat, right? Like, I've looked at the book, I've had a beat. I still don't know how I feel about that. So, like, I think they ended it well. Yeah. I think they covered the things that they needed to, and we'll get into that. But, like, I'm still left feeling uneasy, I guess, because it appears there were places they made some decisions or some cuts that they didn't have to. Is you know, from a looking into the television thing and where they were pointing and what they had this season going to. It's kind of like, wait, you went there?
There was a little bit of that, I think, leading up to this, where it was like, oh, we spent a good amount of time, like, because here's the thing with finales sometimes. Sometimes we spend so much time building up to it that when it's finally kind of like it wraps or like storylines hit their end, it's almost like, not that you wanted something bigger, but, you know, it feels like, oh, we had just spent a lot of time and only doing these things. You know what I mean? That it probably kind of should have been something more. You know what I mean? Like if, like this show in retrospect, probably this season could have found ways to dabble with some other elements some more elements from the book, even if it's these last chapters. Like there were certain things in this last episode that kind of come out of the book that are just like they're shadows of how it went down in the book, or they're shadows of specific conversations. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, these two did meet at around this time in the book. It was a different conversation. It was a different exchange. Went down differently, you know, and I get that too, because it's TV and it's also trying to like, well, you know, we've established some stuff already. So we kind of do have to serve those beasts as well.
And I know we'll get into the specifics in a moment. And I know, like, we're talking general. So I will say my biggest critique about the final, the finale, and even the few episodes leading up to it, those fight scenes for the first like 15 minutes of this finale are so comic booky. Why couldn't they shoot the whole fucking series like like, why is it just like, oh, this is based off of a comic book? Let's spend 15 minutes reminding people it's based off of a comic book with all these like like fight scenes that remind you of panels.
Yeah.
Where was that for the other 3.5 seasons? Like that was the most.
Yeah, they did it
if you
once
remove storytelling.
Yeah, they did it
that
once
was
earlier.
Most mind-blowing.
Yeah, they did it once earlier in the season, and it was like, oh, okay, that's a cool little nod to it. And, yeah, you know what? It should have been in their bag of tricks from the jump. You know, during those kinds of like, oh, we want to instead of showing, because we want things simultaneously to be ramping up, right? Because that's what happens in a lot of finales. So there's like 4 different fights going on an action show. It's like this guy's over here trying to do something. This one's over there. He's got the bomb. This one's got the girl. They're on the cliff. Like, you know what I mean? And we're bouncing back and forth. But, you know what I mean? This is a show that's like, you know, we don't have to jam comic books down people's throat. But much like on 24, where they used to do the 4-way split screen and kind of show you a little bit and sometimes let all 4 of them linger a little bit, you know, we could have had some fun with that. I'm glad it kind of came in at the end. It's very much homage-y, you know, to the fact of, oh, okay, this comes from a comic book, and it doesn't get. It's one of the few things you can do that doesn't feel campy or forced. It actually would feel just like it's a trick. It's a you know, we've seen it kind of in other places and other things. It doesn't feel like, you know, it doesn't scream comic book, which I like. You know what I mean? Like sometimes on TV shows, like I'm a big comic book fan, so sometimes I feel like when they try to make it look like a comic book and they like to do certain things, it's like, you know, it's like when a plumber watches somebody do plumbing on TV and they're like, that's not how you do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
no, I get that, but I just go back to even this season, like the fight with Tulip and Featherstone on the cliff. Like you could have made that like you could have shot that like you shot some of these fight scenes at the end. And the fact that like that particular one, the Featherstone and Tulip in particular, because it goes on for a beat while other things are going on, just like Hitler and Jesus in this one. Like they could have shot it like that comic book feel, but they just kind of saved it for now. I feel like it was like somebody was like had senioritis and they were like, I'm out, like put in my junior exec, and the junior exec was like, hey guys, you remember this is based off a comic book, right? Like we could shoot this like a comic book, right? And
that's
like,
what I feel like happens.
Good idea.
Whatever episode director was in for that episode, like 3 episodes or 2 episodes ago when they did it, and everyone was like, oh, yeah, we could do that. And then, like, when it was coming down to this in the editing room, they're probably like, hey, you know what? A couple episodes ago, we kind of did this thing. We could do that again and help build the tension, too. Like, you know? And
where was that guy in season 1?
You know what I mean? And in
season 1,
of the
plot stuff.
And in season 1, imagine, like, them using that in addition to the stuff that they were already kind of doing with camera play and stuff like that during the hotel stuff with the angels when they kept on, like, all the ants kept on coming. You could have shown like 17 different things happening, just you know, really pushing out the time spent, like, you know what I mean, in the room, because that's the thing with comics, right? People forget, like, it's about time in comics. Like from panel A to panel B, time passes. You know what I mean? So it's rare where you can kind of do some of the tricks you can do in a comic book page in TV and movies, because we don't do panels like that at all. You know, we don't do a thing where it's like, oh, look at a multitude of things and then you know, read it through and then process it out. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, anyway, I'm turning into a fucking hardcore comic nerd.
But like general
my true colors are showing.
That's one of those. That was probably the one, like the biggest takeaway for me was like, this felt better. Like this felt more genuine.
Yeah, I feel like it was a good finale overall. I feel like it served the many facets really well. I feel like nothing stuck out to me like, oh, that was like, nothing bothered me too much. And as far as, you know, keeping it within its own context, the show, you know, and it was kind of like, you know, a fairly good time. The pace of it was really quick because it just couldn't stop. They didn't have time for anything like that. And we'll get into it in a minute, but the opening sequence, which is just got like this song playing and there's like no music, no dialogue for like a couple minutes, and they're just showing you stuff. Like that's the show that I wanted. Like the tone that comes through on that, like that's the show. Like to me, that's what Preacher should have been. But anyway, music goes a long way with that kind of stuff. But again, it kind of goes to the panels thing where it's like they kind of didn't do enough for all the weirdness and experimenting that the show has done. There were some things that I've seen other places that I wouldn't have minded seeing here too. Stuff like that. Just like long sequences where it's not about like a montage necessarily, but we open with a no dialogue stuff and a song playing and like. Really, like we went and found a song that fits like really well, like this kind of shit. But anyway, back to what I thought of this. This was served all its beasts and its needs. Comparing it to the book, it's hard. I do like that they managed to squeeze in some stuff from the end of run of the book, stuff that didn't seem like they were going to get to, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But they managed to find a way to squeeze it in. Even if it's just a location. And I don't know, there are some changes. There are some things that like I didn't really realize till like just before we recorded. That's like, really? Oh yeah, right.
I will say we will get to it, but the only other takeaway I have is there are a few things that they didn't take far enough. Like I understand where they went, but it's like, like another 5 minutes would have killed you, or another like 30 seconds, or I can't get the one thing I really want. Like, come on.
Yeah, you ran this over time anyway. Like, you can't get a couple more minutes out of the network. I mean, come on, it's the last episode, and you ended up on a weird time anyway. So, what's up with that? So let's just now. Speaking of getting to it, let's just get to it. Right?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so this is your last warning. This is season 4. This is the end. If you haven't read the books, obviously we're giving shit away. You can find Palmer at Agent Palmer on Twitter, agentpalmer.com, all that good stuff. I would say if you want to send an email to this show, you can send it. You sent an email.
I did.
Do you want to get into that at some point?
We'll get it at the end. It's probably better at the end.
Better at the end. Very good. So,
but I still want you to read it. Is that?
Oh yeah, I'll
wrong?
open it up. I'll read it. Just remind me in case I start to breeze past it because I don't have a note for it right in front of me or anything. I'll try to open it up on the sneak while we're doing the show. Actually, I'll open up a blank tab and maybe that'll remind me. Okay, so. So that's pretty much it. We have a bell somewhere. Where'd I put the bell? Here it is. Here it is.
It's gonna get a little bit of use today.
It's gonna get a workout. All right, you're gonna help me.
Maybe
out
not
with
like a straight heavy workout, but you'll hear the bell.
Very good, very good. And then we get that gong, and then we get into it. The big bell, the big church bell from season 1. Okay, so let me get my notes. This episode, Palmer, is titled "End of the World." Do you get it?
I mean, I do.
Because
although
because the big recurring line is always "until the end of the world."
Yes,
and this is the last episode.
Which this is all fine, except the moment I finished watching, I was scrolling through my Google News that it suggests for me, and up came an article from Screen Rant about the small possibility of a season 5, and what's more likely is that in 10 years somebody's going to revisit the material and try again with a better adaptation. And I was like, why are you writing this? Like, what is going, like, really? Like, the thing, it's the body's not even like cold.
I don't know if it was on this show in one of the recent episodes, but I think I was talking about like, or maybe it was to Ed just in general, but Ed O'Hare, but just on like, will anybody ever try and relaunch this clean. And I was just like, look, if they do, they got to put it in the 90s. Because by the time enough passes where it's worth doing again, and this gets cold a little bit, like, you know what I mean? What's the safe time before you reboot? You might as well make it like a time period type thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I will also say it's getting shorter. Like with the amount of streaming and binging content, you don't have to wait. I would say Screen Rant wrote like 20 years. I don't think you have to wait that long because the amount of content coming at us, we forget stuff so quickly that you could probably tackle this in 7 and release it in 10 years.
I do think, though, that in this day and age, as people say nowadays, or have been saying since they coined that term, that, I'd be surprised if anybody really takes another whack at it. Because if you consider how much this was like a toxic kind of property because of the material for so long, and these guys are putting a certain stamp on it where it's kind of got even crazier things going on.
That's fair.
I mean, come on. Jesus and Hitler had a fight. You know what I mean? This is the show we're talking about.
An epic fight. An epic fight. And, what's great is that that's not in the comics. So, conceivably there could be a more straight-laced show to come out of this. But let's talk about this one. Yes.
It starts out with this cold open I was just talking about. North Dakota, a truck, like a van is pulling into an army base of some type. There's just music going. There's no dialogue. It turns out it's like a missile silo. This female agent, soldier, she gives a highbrow general some type folder or whatever. It turns out she's from the Grail, shoots him, shoots the other guy. One of the control module guys turns out to be Grail as well. And so now they both have keys for this nuke because they're in a silo. And Grail now has like control of it,
So that entire scene, I cannot remove from my brain War Games.
Okay.
In the beginning of War Games were those two guys. Actually, it's Michael Madsen and one of the guys who was in West Wing, who the name escapes me.
Well, if Michael Madsen is in charge of the nukes, we all have a problem.
But they're both sitting there in the silo, like, turn your keys, and then they get replaced by a computer, and that's how War Games starts, right? But all I keep thinking is, like, they're just sitting there. And we check in with them twice throughout the rest of it, but because of the framing shots that they had, I was like, well, these guys enjoyed War Games. Unless there's literally no other way to shoot a missile silo, which now that I'm saying it, maybe that's the case. Maybe, like, there are no other camera angles. That's how you shoot a missile silo.
Well, you have heard, like, the problem with missile silos is that, like, they were all, like, so many of them were made in the 70s and 80s that, like, all the technology now, like, almost like they just, like, how do you replace all this stuff, and you know what I mean, make it work with other systems and all this kinds of shit. I read an article. Anyway, so we then cut to the Apocalypse 2020 marathon, telethon, deathathon, apocathon thing, and the countdown clock has got 8 minutes and 56 seconds.
Yep.
So that gives us a bearing. I'm like, and in my
head, mean, just in time. I will say, at this point in time, the Grail takes over the missile silo, and I'm wondering if this is part of the overall plan or part of Star's Apocalypse Plus or whatever the fuck he called it, right? Like Apocalypse Light, whatever it is. Like, because we at this point we haven't seen what we're going to see within the next couple minutes, which is him still trying to fax shit.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, is this part of it? Like, is this like the two people that are like, all right, don't launch these nuclear bombs so that the Grail, like, whatever it is, like, I'm just like, all right, what am I watching?
I gave the show too much credit. I was like, how are they going to stretch out this whole episode to make it be that it was all 9 minutes? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how we're going to, like, because we have to count down to the last second. Like, you know what I mean? In my head, it wasn't like, oh, this is going to burn itself off before the next commercial break. Like, you know? But then we jump to Humperdoo in his dressing room, and he's nervous. He doesn't really want to go do it. He's got stage fright. And Cassidy's basically like, don't worry, you got this. You know, it's not that big a deal. And God's like, come on, like, I've seen, I forget who he is, Cary Grant, somebody.
Well,
like
no. Cassidy goes, "You look like Gene Kelly."
Oh, right.
And God, and this is where I get upset because I'm like, you can't name drop something like that, and I'm not. Because God goes like, "Oh, Gene Kelly, I can tell you stories," and me, I was like, I want to know the stories. Like what? Because like the writers of this show are so good at that kind of stuff. Like,
it does feel like the next thing he says should be like a little reference to that. Like don't I could go on and on about the pineapple situation. Like you know
something
what I mean?
like yeah, but he said it, and I was like, well, what about Gene Kelly? Like,
what do you know? God's got all his dirty laundry. But God's about to leave, and Cass is like, well, basically, he says to him, he's like, well, why not just blow it up? Like, why all this? Song and dance, like why all this bullshit? And he's like, look, like you all have, a part to play. You have to play your part. And that's the fun of it. And
he uses the word of God on the and fun, which I was, and his eyes change and shit, and I was like, what? I don't get it.
Well, it's
like,
not so much that it's the word of God. It's just that, like, he just gets, when he gets either rageful or like really excited, that's a thing that happens to him. Like, because I was thinking about it during this episode. I'm like, he's using it when he speaks to people, but it's not like he's giving commands. So it's not like Jesse's word of God. It's just that thing that he does when he like wants to be godly, and then it comes out. I think it's a thing where like it slips out.
Because I guess I just get confused because visually sometimes they changed. In the beginning, they were changing Jesse's eyes when he used Genesis. And they used the same audio overdub that they used for Jesse on Genesis. So I was like, well, that's the word of God.
The other difference
but he's not giving a command.
And the other thing I noticed, too, last time God did this was that there's no vibrating camera.
Okay.
Like that's the thing that they do specifically with Jesse for sure is that vibration. But God says he likes to watch, and it had gotten me thinking a little bit about it because Cassie goes he likes to watch, and right before Cassie even said that, I was thinking, oh, we're like his TV show, like for this God, like
absolutely.
He like he says it later. I was infinitely lonely, so he was like bored, and he's like, I'll create this world inside of a certain kind of parameters, and I have to let it kind of unfold because that's the way I created it. And since I'm God, I created a world that I can't like uncreate, basically. It has to wipe itself clean, or I have to wipe it clean, but like here it is. Like this is my entertainment, and sometimes I mess with it, sometimes I don't. Like, it's like imagine if you had like a TV show you could watch, but it's like an ant farm. It's like The Sims. You know what I mean? And sometimes you can put your finger in and fuck with people, and then other times you sit back and watch. We're like his Sims.
Yeah,
it's fucked
that's
up.
Fair.
It's fucked up, is what it is. Cassidy's right. It's fucked up. But then God leaves, and he goes and he slips into the crowd, basically. We cut to Jesse. He's punching Santa killers in the face. He does. Saint chokes him, lifts him, slams him down, throws him, basically, pulls the gun. But then, who shows up?
The parents. My favorite line too. He's like, the parents will not be happy. Like, wait, what?
And,
right. Because then we also get, looks like you brought a gun to a knife fight.
Yeah, I was not going to mention that. I kind of like groaned when I heard that. I was like,
I enjoyed it because I've seen what the rest of this show. I've seen what the writers have done with the rest of this show. So I was like, all right, I'll take it. I'll enjoy
Maybe
it.
Jesse just didn't have enough for me. Just didn't have enough of the delivery of like, I know this is corny, but I'm going to say it anyway. Because at least that would have said that would.
You wanted him to hesitate before he said it, and he just said it.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted that look on his face, like, okay, I'm going to say, like, I'm going to say this anyway, in case, like, like, I know this is stupid, but you brought a knife to a gunfight. So, yeah, and I don't know if you heard the last episode we did. I think I was talking about how, like, when they all get dropped off at the Grail by the Angel and Demon, it was kind of weird to me. I was like, oh, it's a shame to see them go and not have a little bit more of a story with them, that they just dropped them off. I was like, I thought they were going to go in as, like, this big collective now. Now it's 5 people kind of storming the castle. You know what I mean? So to see them pop up here, I was like, oh, okay. I knew we weren't done with them, at the very least.
I wonder if when Jesse's calling the Saint at the end of the last episode,
right,
if he also somehow, like, if the parents knew to come too, because otherwise, how the fuck where did they go? What
brought them back?
Yeah,
you know, we don't get any time, no line of dialogue on that, which is all the show really would have to have used to kind of like clarify a little bit. Like, we felt guilty. We want to make sure we didn't really trust our kid with you. Like, you're not the greatest of babysitters, Jesse. So from there, we cut to Featherstone, and she's like, it's a close up on her, and she's basically telling her life story to the camera. But as we pull back, we see that she's got a gun on Saint of Killers, and she's basically saying that her life was shit until she met him, you know. I keep jumping around.
No, you went Featherstone and Tulip now. Right?
Yeah, now we're to Tulip. Yeah, so we cut over to Tulip, and she's like, not Star, she's with Tulip right now. And Tulip's like, oh yeah, well, you know, fucking, there's nothing like a humorless cruelty. You know, that's a great trait to have to, you know, put on a guy, to be into. It's kind of
I do think that there are two things I love about this scene. One, I feel like it's probably the best acting Julianne Emery has gotten to actually do as Featherstone.
Yeah.
Because everything else has been so dry, and this was, like, so dramatic. It's like, she probably read the script and went, oh, I get to do something, like, good.
She's got a few great moments in this one, like, where she actually gets to kind of, you know, show some actual fucking depth in that character, where we finally see some human elements. Like, it's been very rare in the series where, like, that character's gotten a shot. Like, you know, you get her motivations and everything, but you don't really ever see her kind of break, you know? And that's what she's really doing here. She's breaking.
And Tulip's, and I'm paraphrasing here, Tulip's punchline of, to do what's right for you can sometimes be righteous. It feels like, all right, well, Featherstone's been a follower for, like, all this time.
Yeah.
And it's like, to hear that, like, you can be selfish sometimes, like, it makes sense. And again, and this is one of those things where it so vastly differs from the book.
Yeah.
Because, like, this is a conversation that doesn't even need to happen. And it doesn't even get, like, whiffed at in the books.
Yeah.
But because of the series, I feel like it works. Like, I'm not going to complain about it because of the direction they already chose.
Sure.
Like, this is where it was going.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with the show. The show feels a different sense of what closure is, or character arc commitments that are different than the comics commitments to its characters. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the story has different needs because of those differences inherently. But yeah, so like, because, you know, she tries to kill herself. Like, you know, she pulls out that gun, clicks it like 3 times, which is then when Tulip is like, look, you know, you don't need God, you don't need a man, you don't need any of this, you know, you're doing for everybody else except you, really. You're living for them, you're not living for you, and sometimes you're right, that can be righteous too. That can, you know. So it's an interesting scene, it's an interesting exchange. We cut back to otherwhere in the Grail HQ, and Jesus and Hitler are just kind of scrapping. They're just kind of...
It's so good. Like, it's just so good. And but this is my biggest critique about that fight. I want to know how it started. Like, because when we see it, at least this episode, they're already like going at it. Like punches have been thrown for a while. Like I know there were tensions building last week.
Well, remember Hitler was about to leave, and Hitler had the gun, and he was gonna he was gonna kill the Messiah, I think.
Yeah.
And at the door, it turned to like a little high school shoving match, and they went like off into the bushes, and I don't think we cut back to it. And if we did, they were just kind of scrapping. But now they're down and dirty, breaking up the furniture, and like it's the running gag for a while because it's like, well, we don't have a lot to do with them until a little bit later, so we'll just cut back once in a while and watch them break up the room some more, you know what I mean? But they're doing some great stunts in it, too. There's a couple of great throws and body shots, fucking just launching into fucking across the room and shit that were, like, really well done.
This is called... We don't need this furniture for another shot.
Right.
So let's break it.
Let's break the set. Fuck it. And so, so we cut away from that real quick. We just kind of set foot in there real quick. And then we cut to Star versus the fax machine. Still ongoing.
Still.
And
Don't put me on hold. Don't put me on.
Yeah, it's the whole, but you don't understand. This is a really important fax.
You would think that the Grail would have its own technical wing.
Listen, man, this is how this is how governments fall, okay? It's just one little oversight. It's just one little thing. I mean, these big, too big to fail type entities, Didn't you see the firm? The twist in the firm, when it's about the mail. And each one of them is an infraction against the federal statute 61324. The only time I was like, oh, wait, way to go, Tom Cruise. Clerical crime. Anyway, so with that, hold on, I'm about to start a fire. What a way to end the show, huh? Burn down the apartment. Don't smoke and podcast, kids. Okay. You still there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. So then God has now slipped into the crowd.
By the way.
Yeah.
In that first shot, because they lingered low enough on the banner that I was like, all right, what the hell is James 5'8"? Because I've never, we've seen, it's from the wrestling days. I've seen 316. I've seen all that shit, right?
Sure.
But James 5'8", I don't think I've ever seen a single digit one ever. So I looked it up.
Okay.
And it's, you too be patient and stand firm because the Lord's coming is near. And I was like, all right.
It's fitting.
It's fitting. That's fair enough.
I was kind of expecting a punchline. I feel like any kind of thing I have to go look up, I want some kind of, punchline.
It's very on the nose.
Yes.
Very on the nose.
Yes. That feels like somebody knew that already and was like, guys in the writer's room, this reminds me of James 5'8". I don't know my scripture that well. And so basically, I think it starts here, but there's this couple in the crowd right in front of him.
I loved it.
And they notice him.
Turn around
yeah. And they're the stereotypical annoying white couple kind of fan, who's now gonna not. He's just not gonna leave him alone. Go ahead.
They're the only ones.
Right.
He's not it's not like they're the only people sitting he's literally in the middle, dead center, surrounded by Grail people. And it's just this couple in front that's like, we'll talk to him. Everybody else
Palmer,
is enjoying the show.
This is how we know they're douchebags. Everybody else saw God come in. He walked by 12 people to get to that spot. But these people, because they don't know boundaries, really, as is evidenced as later on, he's still talking to him. You know what I mean? But they got no fucking, they don't get it. Everybody else is like, hey, it's a celebrity. I'm not gonna bother him. I'm just gonna leave him be. I'm not gonna be that guy. I'm not. Somebody else will be that guy. Oh, look, it's two of that guy. It's a husband and wife. You know what I mean?
It's that couple.
It's that couple. You know what I mean? Where they want to try and talk to you like evenly and coolly, so that later on you'd be like, hey, why don't you come hang out with me? It's not gonna happen.
I mean, yeah, they were gonna. I mean, if they were stuck with him in the stands for any longer of time, they would have asked him to swing.
Yeah.
I mean,
like,
it was going down that road if it had lasted that long.
You want to come to a key party? Yeah. Okay. So then we hear the announcer, and he's like, "It's the moment you've been waiting 2,000 years for, the Messiah." And I just thought that was great. But we cut back to the room, you know, and Do, as I like to call him in my notes, just apostrophe Do.
Nice.
He's not going on. Cassidy tries, and then he slips.
He even throws down the walking stick, which I felt like that's the final straw, right? Like Humperdoo has never like really done anything in anger, like ever. Like even when he was throwing feces early on, like I feel like that was just he didn't know any better, you know. But now, like they've kind of like. And it's so odd from our first introduction of Humperdoo to this like one act of defiance.
Yes, but I felt like time he put his foot down.
Him throwing that down was like his one like, all right, the gauntlets are off, I'm done.
And then he goes and he hides in the clothes rack. And I thought it was going to be the bit like, because last time God slid the clothes rack to hide the body in the wall, so I thought it was going to be like, oh, I'm going into the clothes rack. Nope, no, I'm coming right out. Like, you know what I mean?
I thought somehow like maybe I missed something, and like there was going to be. I thought when he first goes in the clothes rack, I was like, all right, how far did God throw that? Like, is there a hole in the wall? Like,
right.
I thought like it was going to be the gag of like he goes in the clothes and Cassidy's like, come out of the clothes, and then Cassidy moves the rack and he's gone.
Right. So from there, Tulip arrives in their room and is like, hey, what you doing? But we cut away. Santa Killers versus Genesis' parents is going down. They're getting scrappy. He's shooting at them. They're deflecting bullets with the swords. This, that, the other. The mom tags him, gets a little cut on his face, and it's like, oh shit, they can fuck him up. But we cut back to Jesus versus Hitler. Speaking of fucking shit up, and these two are going at it. And fucking Hitler calls him a hippie wimp, and then Jesus calls him a fascist pig.
Yes.
One of those two is right. I mean, call Jesus a hippie, but I wouldn't classify him necessarily as a wimp. He got bold every now and then. He stood up to people once in a while. And then, like, we cut to... Now, this is when we get to all those panels you were talking about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is when that starts. Yeah. And one of them's got Star. He's just like, he's stabbing the fax machine. You know what I mean? And then there's like, we're kind of bouncing around these little things. And then one shows the clock at 19 seconds.
Yep.
So that's been ticking away.
And you know what's funny is I think there's only like, when the opening shot of God and the annoying couple shows the time. But aside from the very beginning of the episode, and this 19 seconds, it's only that one like passing like where we're at. They don't, which is surprising because for this show you would expect like every 2 minutes it's like, all right, we're at 7 minutes here. And even if it's not actual passage of time, it's like the passage of time in that universe. Like we would always know exactly how much time is left to the 4 zeros. And they
could have used it to build up the drama a little bit.
And they really don't, which I guess is fair enough because it's going to be late.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, like from the outside head space of like, oh, we just kind of didn't even realize that because part of us, I guess, was on the autopilot of knowing like it wasn't going to matter a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, if Palmer, if you were there and mentioned it, yeah, it would have happened. You know, but in one of those little panels, we see Featherstone leaving that room. Because Tulip had left her there. Tulip had just kind of like walked out. She's like, I'm taking the gun and I'm leaving. And so now Featherstone leaves. She's got another gun in her sock or in her ankle holster. And then we see the clock tick down to 0.
We do. And then nothing.
Commercial. And then when we come back, we're in a hospital. And there's a person there with a bandaged head.
And you get, I mean, listen, this is bell-worthy because you had said in the last episode, like, when he wakes up, he better be a little bit rougher and closer to the comics.
I definitely was, like, looking for it as an opportunity to make him as ugly as the books. But, you know,
They messed him up. They roughed him up a little bit more.
Tiny.
I will say
the gag, though, the whole angle of doing this gag, what did you first think was going to happen when they took off the
All right,
bandages?
so I was rooting for it to be, like, rougher, but I was so, like, please don't let his face be normal. Like, because the doctor's building it up like you were their pet project. And I'm like,
Right.
All right, so this is just going to be a weird plastic surgery gone wrong, but he's going to have a mouth and lips again. And I was like, please don't do this.
Yeah.
But the real payoff of this entire scene is the spit that happens when Eugene starts talking back to the doctor.
Well, that's another scene later on.
Oh, no, that's still further on?
Yeah, that's a little later on because that's at night when the doctor sneaks in.
Okay.
But I feel like the payoff of the joke of it being that, like, the buildup is, you know, you're going to look beautiful, and then he looks exactly the same, but the reaction is complete revolting horror from everybody around because the wound on his forehead is like it's like 8 stitches on his forehead. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, we did so much plastic surgery, you know, so the whole buildup and the gag of it really works if you're sitting there thinking and going through that in your head, like, oh my God, is he going to be normal looking again? Like, he can't be perfect. Like,
I was hesitant. They had me thinking, like, please don't do this.
Mm-hmm.
So mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
I think that's what they were aiming for, right?
Mission accomplished, and the gag doesn't work really. The joke gag of him being exactly the same as he went in, basically, and them all freaking out doesn't work unless you have that internal struggle. I think it's a really smart joke. Kudos on that. But that's all we get for him for a little bit. So that was A-Face. Where's A-Face in my notes?
I mean, it jumped in my head, like, now, and I mean, I didn't watch it that long ago. All the storylines are coming, like, together.
Yeah. We're back now in the Grail Church with Santa kills Jesse and the angels. Saint stabs one of the angel who crawls over with Jesse, and it's like this little conversation about, you know, you gotta do the right thing, and Jesse's like, well, what the hell is the right thing?
And don't you come back?
Yeah.
Like, that's...
But this turns out to be it, kind of. Like, this guy killing me with his weapons, I guess, is the thing. You know, doesn't look good. Probably not going to come back from this one. Hold on. Yeah.
We know they don't come back because usually when they die, it's a flash and they're back immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that when they fall, there's no flash, I think that's the sign, right? Because, like, every other time the angel or the demon or the other angels died, it was pretty instantaneous, them coming back.
Yeah. Well, I just mean in the sense of, like, the questioning nature of it for me was just like, you know, the actual, is it just because of the weapons? You know what I mean? Or, you know,
that's fair.
That's kind of where I was coming from. But he does indeed die. He dies, and then the demon chick dies. But Jesse does get an idea. And we see that on his face. And then we cut to Jesus and Hitler still fighting, still breaking furniture. And then we cut away. We just dip it in. We cut back to Tulip. And she's telling Cassidy, like, if Humperdoo lives, everybody dies. And she's has this little breakdown moment of him, you know, of their shit. She's like, look, I get it. You love me, but you got to move on from that and move out of my way. I want to kill this motherfucker, you know? And so he's not moving, so she punches him in the face a couple times, enough to get him to the point where he's like, if you do it again, I'm honestly going to fucking kill you. And we are recording this before it airs. I'm curious if the F-bomb will air. because from what I understand, AMC lets their shows, these particular shows, at this
They
time
get
slot,
one.
They get one F-bomb a season.
I don't think we used it, right?
I don't know. I don't think we've used it, but I'm just curious if that still stands, kind of in a way. I don't know. I mean,
I also wonder why this would be the place where you would use it. I mean, given what the rest of the episode is, I wonder why this is where you use it.
I think it's also about how it's used too, because I know, like in movies, like in a PG-13, you can get like one F-bomb, but it can't be "fuck you." It has to be like, "I can't fucking believe this," or "what the fuck is this?" That kind of thing. It depends on how it's used. There's a usage limit, so that might have been part of it. I'm sure they looked at this script and were like, where are we going to put our one F-bomb? And I feel like that was probably a decent place to put it because it sells the whole how honest Cassidy is in that second. Where he's like, like, I don't want to hit a woman, but like, I fucking will. Okay? Like, I don't want to put my hands on you, but I'm serious. And I will fuck you up, is what he's kind of saying, like, but she don't give a shit. But we cut away, and it's the apocalypse show. God is still getting his ear chewed off by that fucking guy, just random nonsense shit. Cut to Star's, like, office, and this is where Featherstone has the gun on him, and, she's, like, ready to kill him. But then he schmoozes it over by telling her stuff like, look, we'll go on after this is all over together. That's like his plan. We're going to, frolic and do anus fucking stuff. I'm going to use my anus on you.
Yeah, you'll never get a better offer.
Yeah, basically. And she's, kind of amazed, and taken aback, and she starts to tear up, and then he calls her Flufferman again. And that's it. And so she's like, that's the last time you're going to call me that. My name is Featherstone. Gunshot. But she gets shot. And she falls. And she dies. And I was kind of surprised because, if anybody was going to kill anybody in that scene, I kind of figured, maybe this is where Star dies. You know what I mean? Because he dies in the book.
Yeah, so he dies in the book at Tulip's hand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I expected this to be the scene because it's like, well, because of what Tulip's off with Cassidy, at least at this point in the episode, I'm like, this has got to be it. This has got to be where Star gets it because, like, Tulip's got enough, like, she's got like 12 plot lines tied up in her. Yes. She can't come over and kill Star. This is the moment Star gets felled. And honestly, not the biggest, I don't know, but like one of the biggest shocks.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
He doesn't die here, and then he doesn't die.
Yeah. Not only does he not die here, he doesn't get killed. Which is bothersome. Yeah, we'll get to it. But I didn't think going into the scene, seeing her with the gun, like, I wasn't worried about either one of them, to be honest with you, in that moment. I was like, this was just play itself out of it. Plus, once he started talking to her, smoozing her a little bit, I was like, okay, he's just going to manipulate his way out of it. But he was done with it, too. So he doesn't. He shoots her, and then he puts his gun in the drawer, and that's kind of it. Then we cut to real quick scene of Saint the Killer's kneeling, and Jesse just chopping off his head.
Yep.
And then, like, we're just kind of shown that, which, felt like, something was missing from that. Why didn't we see more? I wonder what really happened. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we watched the episode, obviously. We know what happened, and we'll talk to it in the timeline, but it feels like doing that out of order because it's a finale doesn't buy you anything. Like, I really don't know.
Well, I think the thing they're trying to do there is the same thing that they do in the book. Because in the book, you don't know exactly what that deal is. The Santa Killer showing up and killing God is the last of the great reveals in the book. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, shit, Santa Killers is there. Oh, fuck, I didn't even think of that. And it's like, oh, yeah, me and Jesse made a deal. Sucks to be you, you know what I mean? And they have their whole exchange. So I feel like they're trying to do that kind of a reveal. But it tips the hand a little bit by not being any longer than that.
Well, it tips the hand, and it also, one of those things, that what makes it such a great reveal in the book is time. We spend all this time with Jesse as the sheriff and with Eugene's love story that we're so far removed from the last time we even saw Saint on a panel.
Right. Yeah.
And this is happening basically halfway through the episode thereabouts.
But if you think about it, a similar thing kind of happens, though, because this TV story goes on and we do a time jump. And it's a while before God finally does see Jesse again and finally does go back to heaven and get confronted. So the whole time, that's a long Earth amount of time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Saint is just sitting there waiting for him, basically. You know? So there is like 2 years that goes by. So in that regard, it does, it does echo the book for that. You know, I'll give it a couple of bells because of the deal him and Jesse made. I was happy to see that. And for making that timeline work out similarly. Because that's not like a story up front thing. You know what I mean? That's actually a little tucked back. You know what I mean? You have to be looking for it. So with that, Jesse cuts off his head. Right. So Tulip and Cassidy are now fighting. They're going at it. It's, a little scrappy. We cut away to God in the crowd at the show. He sends his new friends. He finds finally a way to get rid of them. Why don't you guys go check on him, on the old Humperdooski, and see what's going on back there. And he sees one of the Grail guys, security guys. He's like, yeah, why don't you go with him too? That's not verbatim. And then
you might. I think God says something like you might want to take some more muscle or something like that. You're going to need a bit.
Yeah,
and just you two annoying people.
Yeah, which is like literally what the situation becomes. It's one of those lines of dialogue or a scene sometimes gets written a little too exact because the writer already knows what comes later. Like, it's like, okay, you don't have to foreshadow everything. You know what I mean?
I did wish, I was kind of hoping, like when God's like, you should go check on them because we know what's coming. I'm like, oh, maybe he's just going to send them off to die, and then he's going to send in the team to go rescue Humperdoo. Right. He's leading these two lambs to the slaughter. Like, I was really hoping for that. Like, the fact that they're alive at the end of the next, sequences is disappointing to me.
Yeah, it does feel like, like, we're going to let these annoying fucks continue on? Jeez. Yeah. So then we cut into Tulip and Cassidy really going at it now, really getting nasty. This whole thing kind of goes down. Tulip shoots Cassidy, and then it's a whole he's like, you really thought I was the funny one? And she's like, yeah, I thought you were the funny one. And that gets him for a second. And then there's this banging at the door as the Grail guy is charging into it and trying to bust a lock. And
human battering ram against steel and stone. Like, this isn't like, I mean, come on. This could not be the I don't know if there's a dumber Grail guy. Like, this guy's all muscle and no brain.
Right. But it puts the pressure on the situation, and Tulip's like, Cassidy, come on. Like, you got to do it. You got to shoot him. You got to shoot Humperdoo. You got to kill him. And then, finally Cassidy breaks and does it.
But Humperdoo acknowledges it, because Humperdoo's like, to the moon! Before.
It's that sad little fuck.
It's so endearing. Like,
yes,
I cannot believe they make you care about fucking Humperdoo.
Yeah. Just the biggest joke in the world in the book. He kills Humperdoo. Humperdoo, even falls out of the clothing rack. It's a kind of a funny shot. When he comes out of the clothing rack, the face he's got fucking actually made me burst out laughing. Like, it's just fucking funny. Even in his death, they went for one last like joke. But then Jesse comes bursting through the door. We see the Grail agent fall behind him. The trio is back together, which is nice. But then we go to commercial break. So now they're there with Humperdoo. Cassidy's upset. He's crying. It's fond farewells and all that shit. He was special and that stuff. And then Jesse closes the door because there's all these Grail people out in the hallway. They're like, it looks like backstage, kind of like at the talent show, really. There's mimes and jugglers and shit. And then we cut to Hitler versus Jesus, the fight that never ends. Jesus is choking him out, and then finally does. Jesus kills him. Jesus chokes him dead. And that's when God bursts in, and he's basically like, hey, guess what? It's your time. I need you now. Why don't you come? Give me a hand. I could really use somebody do a song and dance. It's your time. You can be the Messiah now if you're into it. And we cut to he says Messiah, and then we cut to the crowd chanting Messiah, Messiah, Messiah. What were you gonna say?
This is where I really like the blood-covered Jesus preaching back to God.
Yeah,
and it's if he's not wearing that outfit covered in blood, doesn't work. Don't care. It's just, let's move along, blah, blah, blah. But, like, because he is, it makes it work so well.
Right before he does that, we cut to Jesse. Jesse walks on the stage with the crowd, and he uses the word, and he's like, listen up, and he gets their attention. We cut back to Jesus, and he's basically like, I'll pass. Like, I'm not into it. And him and his dad, they have this whole heated exchange, and Dad's like, I don't really need you. I could just blow it all up. And he's like, Jesus is like, or you could be merciful. I mean, you could be nice and, loving. And he's like, loving, which is great because, like, anytime someone, like, tells him he should be loving, he's like, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. But then he constantly says it when he's trying to smooth talk somebody. Like, when he's it's his tell. Like, he's lying to you when he's like, but I'm a loving God. Like, because every other time he's like, what?
So, keep this scene like stored away, like on back burner, because when we get to another part, this is exhibit A, and then the other part's exhibit B for one of my questions to you. Oh,
okay, all right. So God is done with him. Like, Jesus looks back up. He's already walked out. God's at the elevator. He sees Star down the hallway
with his bags packed, ready to go,
and he's like, "Oh, busted." And then he smiles, like a really awkward smile. And God's like, just run. And then he runs. Star just runs. Cut back to R's face. This is the scene where the doctor comes in and he's like, look, I know life is tough. I know you've had a lot of struggles. I know it can only be difficult. So I'm here to help you. And, first R's face is like, help me what? Like, what are you, like, so he turns off the fucking heart monitor. He turns off the safety feature on the morphine drip or whatever it was in there. I think it was morphine.
It was morphine.
And he's like, just keep hitting the button, man, till you keep hitting the button till you can't hit it anymore, And, I felt it coming, and I thought he was going to put a pillow over his face. I really thought that was what was going to happen, but then he comes around the bed and goes over to the machinery. So, but like, I caught the vibe very quickly. You know what I mean? Of like, oh, this guy's going to fucking either kill him or try and talk him into killing himself, and that's, lo and behold, what it was. And so R's face kind of rejects the whole thing. Like, you know what I mean? And he's like, fuck you. That's bullshit. I've heard that I'm tired of people like talking to me about that, and like
I'm Eugene Edward Root.
And as he's talking, like you were talking earlier,
the spittle, like that spittle, that was like the best. Like that was. Isn't there like a full page somewhere in the comics or like a cover or something where it's just him with the spit?
Oh, it's constant in the books.
This is This is everything we wanted for him since it happened in season 1.
What a terrible, terrible benchmark. All we needed was some spittle. Which I feel like they kind of did early on. They didn't do it too much, I think, as it went. I mean, the book is constant. In the book, I think the bit is kind of like he's leaky. You know, he's got to constantly wipe himself. You know what I mean? You know, so to have it, and then like an execution is what sells it here, and it's only a thing a book reader could love. You know what I mean? Like your
absolutely.
excitement over it. Like, you could never have just been, like, on a regular show, like, the greatest part. I never read the books, but I think, you know what I mean? That would never happen.
So, from here on out for the rest of the episode, there are moments that book readers are excited and thrilled, and, like, there are beats of anticipation for that if you're listening to this, or if you know people that watch the show that never read the comics, they're going to come to you and be like, I didn't like this final episode. And it's because the pacing from here, literally from here on out, is for people that have read the book. And that's the way it feels.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of that. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not so much for people who read the book, but for them, it's going to land harder. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That kind of a thing. Let's see. So now from there, we go back to Jesse on stage and starts talking to these people, these Grail people. And he's like, look, God's gone. The apocalypse is canceled, basically. But I'm not done with him. I'm not going to chase him anymore. I want you people to go look for him. He uses the word. He says, go find him, and basically sends, I don't know, a few hundred Grail agents or whatever out into the world as his little finders, you know what I mean? And they're going to find him, you know? And now Jesse can just wait, and I guess they'll call me when they find him. Then we cut back to Arseface, who is now out of the hospital since he's only got a small scar on his forehead. And then he's on the corner, and he starts playing Closing Time. And when
Which, for those of you who have the books,
the collected editions,
the collection of 6 books.
Right.
In book 6 at the end, there is a section called Closing Time, which is final preacher portraits. Try and say that 5 times fast. By Glenn Fabry. And it was when I picked this up that I was like, that's why they chose Closing Time.
There you go.
This was their source guide, and they're like, all right, that's fair.
That's not a bad idea. Use that song. So what was funny for me was like, I'm like, is the bit here with Eugene and a guitar that like he never learned the rest of the song? Maybe like he only knows.
Because he just keeps like
stopping, gets into that verse.
It's such a popular song too, like so everybody watching knows like what's next, and in your head you start to go there, and then he stops and tunes a little bit more. He stops and tunes a little bit. What's going on?
Tries it again, and like he gets stuck, and it's just not working, you know. And then suddenly he just fucking rocks out with some original jam, which makes like no sense. I tried looking it up. I tried looking up the lyrics, and it's not to anything. He just riffs and makes up something, and he's fucking super happy with it. He liked it.
He is.
He liked it.
And apparently so are everybody else, because he gets more coinage from this little like 45-second like impromptu session than he got for anybody else. Like everybody's just walking by him when he's starting.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's a funny bit that that's the song that gets you fucking money. That's the last song that would get you money on the street. Like, you know what I mean? You psychopath.
But are you happy that I don't even know if it's happy, because it's like a 2-part question. Are you happy they finally went this direction for him musically? But are you like me, also upset that this is the end of the line.
Well,
like I just kept waiting, like to fast forward, the credits roll, and I'm like waiting for that button. And I know there's a T-shirt coming up, and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
But like, I just kept waiting for the button. Like I wanted to see him on stage.
Yeah, me too. I did figure there'd be some direct mention or something so that our core characters would see it or know, or I mean, even though we know that they probably do know, because how would you not have probably heard about it? Oh, there's this guy with an ass face. He's blowing up the rock scene. He's bringing rock back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so, you know, you kind of would think there'd be a little bit more to it, but you know, press for time and stuff like that, and the particular way they wanted to end this episode too, you know, with the coda that they chose. You know, there's only so much time. The fact that we got them to do anything with Eugene once he split off from the group is kind of like a miracle in of itself. Like if this was a TV show that was kind of just written without source material, I don't think the intention to stick with that at all would have been there still. Like either he would still be with the core group, like they would have done something different with him.
I got you.
Like, you know what I mean?
Fair.
Like he probably would have fell into some other kind of storyline or groove or died or some shit. Like, but because the books kind of are the rails that we're sort of staying on, you know what I mean? Thank God for the books, I guess. I don't know. So he rocks out, and that's the last we see of him. And then we go back to the big show where now it's empty. The room's empty. Our three heroes are on stage. Basically, we saved the world. Who would have thought that would have happened? Not many can say that. You know, Churchill, Frodo Baggins.
I love the Frodo Bag. You know why they did Frodo Baggins?
Why?
Because in the 1960s.
I know you would love this, by the way. Go on.
In the 1960s, and all I keep thinking is that Cassidy was alive during this, so maybe that's why it was a thing. But in the 1960s, Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings became like a huge thing, which is why Frodo Lives was like the first meme ever. I mean, look up Frodo Lives, and it's like it was on bumper stickers and patches and T-shirts all over the 1960s.
I mean, and nowadays, that's how Mark Maron ends every podcast. Frodo lives.
Not quite.
Not quite?
But I like the idea that that's where they went. Because as much as I geeked out about the fact that they were talking about, like, fictional... Because the best delivery in this entire episode is Jesse goes, that didn't really happen. And Cassidy's like, really? Like Cassidy, and he didn't really say anything, but Cassidy's look to like that wasn't real.
Yeah, but Cassidy, you know, he knows. But there's quite a few good deliveries from Jesse in this episode. You know, he gets to have that moment on the stage where, like, you know, it's the last speechifying he does, kind of. You know what I mean? With the spotlights on him and stuff, and he's talking a little bit, but because this is a show that doesn't really seem to do much of that, you know, but it was nice. Anyway, so they're all like, well, you know, now what, basically, you know, it's all until the end of the world, as Tulip screams it out, you know, and now we're past that, so now what? And then, oh shit, flash forward, Texas, 2 years later, what the fuck?
2 whole years.
Like what?
Bill.
Mind blown. Okay. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it flashes 2 years. And I was like...
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it feels arbitrary. Like, could have been 5, could have been 10, 2. Okay.
Yeah. This is kind of how we get there. Well, we get the rest of the story, but we get to see a little. This allows us to get like because all this stuff could have happened in the next like 2 weeks later, 2 days later, 2 hours later.
Well, all but one part. There's only one part of it that couldn't have.
Well, it's the baby,
and that's the baby. Yeah.
Yeah, the baby, and that's why we jump ahead. I mean, they could have gone 12 months. You know what I mean?
How
but
did you? I mean, we'll get there, but like, how do you feel about the baby?
Pretty good. I'm all right with it in the sense of the show because the show had established that they had one and lost one, and it was kind of sitting with Tulip for a long time, and Jesse too. And that, if we go back to it, that's the thing that kind of destroyed them in the show in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, the show doesn't really lay that out, but I mean, if you think
but
about
it is, and
yeah.
So it's the one thing that also brings them back together, basically.
Yeah,
kinda.
I think it's the thing that like, and not only like destroyed them as a couple, but kind of like set them on an even crazier path. Like them, if they had had that kid, that kid might have kept them on on a relatively legal path. But it does jump 2 years later. Jesse and Tulip are up to their old tricks. They're running from the Rodriguez brothers, basically, through backyards and alleys and shit. They hit a dead end, and it's like, fuck, what are we going to do? There's a bunch of them out there. It's like old times. We're cornered. How many bullets you got? I got nothing. I got one. You got your lighter? Yeah, all right. I see some power lines. Tulip's cooking up a plan. And then Jesse gets like, like nostalgic or something. Some kind of wave of like, oh, here we are. It's like old times, and he's happy. He actually gets like a moment of happiness. That fucking son of a bitch. No. So
well, I also like what's weird is they mention the word, but like, the Saint's gone. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little confused by motivation because like, while Tulip's like yelling with him and he's like, I could make them fuck themselves.
Yeah. And it's like,
and that's where I'm like, what's stopping you? The Saint's not after you anymore. God's not coming. Like there's no downside at this point to using Genesis.
Yeah. Not really. I think it's just a matter of, it's when it's conveniently oversighted by the plot of the story because we want to have them do something in particular. It's like once Jesse got the power back, he could have used it at any time, multiple times to kind of stop any fucking scene. You know what I mean? So it's just like, as a writer, it's probably like a little bit too much power. It's like, if you write Superman comics, it's like, I don't know why he puts up with anybody's bullshit. Why, he goes through like half the things he does because he could stop everybody anytime. Like, you know what I mean? So you kind of have to do that shit. But you're right. It was something that went through my head. I'm like, yeah, why don't you just do that? Like, especially if you're surrounded. Like, the odds are not in your favor anymore,
And because we kind of got close to the go fuck yourself, but we never really got it. Yeah. And there was a part of me that when he offered it, I was like,
yeah.
Oh, do we get it now?
Did he say F or did he say go screw themselves? I'll make them screw themselves.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. All I know is like, I was like, wait, do we get it now? Like this?
Yeah.
I know it would be off camera.
But if he did it to 8 guys,
it would make up for the fact that it didn't happen back in season 1.
Right. We made you wait for it a little bit, but we upped it. And so so the outcome of that doesn't even matter to the story. So they just jump past it, and now they are at O'Hare's auto repair, and
that's the same guy, right? They just brought him back from the Holy Grail, whatever. Is that the same guy?
Is it?
Like it looked.
It might have been
familiar.
It might have been,
but I wasn't sure.
You know what? Yeah, I did catch the accent a little bit, but I didn't fixate on him much. I should have. I bet you it is. And so he's like, Jesse's like, well, how did it go without us? And he's like, oh, we had an accident or 3, and it turns out he's talking about a little baby that they got in the back room. And Cassidy called. Tulip says to him, Jesse says to her, by the way, Cassidy called. He's at a peyote conference.
Yeah, of course. Why not?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Old habits die hard.
Which, as much as it sounds like it's in an office, I don't think it is. Or at least if it starts there, it doesn't end there.
No.
But he sounded okay, and then, just let Tulip had she was very interested to know how he was doing. But then a call comes in then. Jesse leaves. Tulip starts singing to the baby a little bit.
Well, right before then, we get the setup that pays off one of the buttons, which is Jesse goes, she looks exactly like you.
Right. Yes.
And completely like, at first you're like, all right, fair enough, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But I will tell you, I fixated on the doll because I could be wrong.
Right.
That doll that was in the crib looked eerily similar to the one that the Saint of Killers was holding.
Oh,
onto.
I missed it. I missed that completely. It probably does.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's similar or the same.
Fair enough.
But it's definitely similar at least.
All right. Yeah, I noticed. Because they it's like right in the camera, but the Stegosaurus on the mobile, obviously, little nod to God. So Jesse goes, answers the phone. She starts singing "Sweet Thing," which is a Van Morrison song.
Yes.
So I had to look that up. I had paused it and looked it up, and I was very much like, oh, this is how they'll end the show. I'm like, this is the song that they will play at the very end. And lo and behold, when we get there. But Jesse comes back in. And he says they found him. She's like, well, where is he? And it says San Antonio. But that's where the Alamo is. And for those of you playing at home, the Alamo is the name of the last leg of the Preacher comics. In the collected version I have, which are the volumes version, Palmer has the books version.
In the book version, the Alamo features on the cover of book 6.
Right. And so, an Alamo is the name of the final book for the volumes, which is 9 volumes. It's a whole packaging thing, folks. Anyway, the books are the newer versions, which are better. We should get those. They're a little better produced and stuff, and obviously not been sitting around since whenever the last time they published this version. Point being, we go to
get a bell.
Yeah, we need a bell. We definitely need a bell for the Alamo. I think there might have been a bell earlier that we missed.
Did we miss the Duke? Did we skip past that, or is that coming?
That's coming. I think that's coming. So Alamo, God is there, his RV. What was funny was all the Grail people who had led Jesse there. And I guess for 2 years, following like the comic book idea of like telling the guy to go count sand, which we never got.
Yep.
Which I'll give him a buzzer for not ever giving us that bit. But this is a flavor of that a little bit, where these people have obviously not done much else besides look for God, because they're dirty, their clothes are kind of worn,
and like 2 of them collapse the moment he's like, "You're done," and they just start fall. I expected all of them to fall.
Yeah. I like the touch of not doing all of them. That made it feel a little bit more realistic in a way. Well, not everybody would probably, but actually they probably would. Now that I think about it, yeah. But basically, it's Jesse tells them go about your lives, and then Jesse and God have this kind of face to face a little bit real quick, where God's like, okay, just do it, hit me with it, try it out. So Jesse tries the word on him. He's like, make it day. And God turns it into daytime.
Make it night.
Make it night. God turns it into nighttime. So he's like, okay, now that you got that out. And they sit down and they have a little chitty chat. Jesse's got questions. So God's like, hit me with your questions. What do you want to know? And he's like, well, what's up with kids and cancer? Like, cancer kids, that's fucked up.
It's the running gag.
Yeah.
Like, that's the running, like, number one question for God this season, or the discussion.
Yeah.
But
it's also, I think the reason that they use it so much is because conversationally, that is like a default thing people go to first. Like when they want to curse fair. God these days, it's like, well, we'll explain kids with cancer. That's, you know what I mean? Because it is one of the most fucked up things, but, it is a common talking point,
I do like that they get then they start talking. He's like, well, the other religions, like, they're completely wrong, right? And God, like, the answer is like, no.
He's like, they're okay mostly. Like, that's kind of like the reaction. He's like, yeah, there's some little column A, column B.
So my question is, compared to God walking out on Jesus trying to tell him to be compassionate and a loving God.
Right.
And this conversation right here, what's the more blasphemous, Bill? Because clearly the people that would be offended has stopped watching this show.
Oh, gee, you think?
But what's the more blasphemous? Like, because it feels like it's a 1-2 punch, but I'm not sure which one's the lead hook.
I don't know which. I don't see either one as like incredibly blasphemous. What's the blasphemous in the conversation that they're having?
I just feel like if I was a deeply religious person, like God walking out on being a loving God, and then God being like, well, there's only one good religion. Like, both of those seem pretty. For this show, it's fine, but out of context, I feel like that there's a right-wing website that's like, after 4 seasons, I finally got my filth on this show, Preacher.
Yeah, I guess. I think probably, like, well, here, not to get too deep into it, but a truly religious person would probably say that the more blasphemous thing is God walking out on being a loving God in that conversation with Jesus, because you have to believe in God to get into heaven. Yeah, we all know that. Like, that's going to be there. Like, those who believe that, that's the rule. Like, that is the stipulation. But to me, it's like, I kind of took his reaction to that, his explanation of that, a little bit more, because he was like, well, everybody think all of them go to hell, and he was like, well, and I think it's kind of like a truncated version of us having a 10-minute conversation about like getting down into the terms and conditions of the contract. Like, you know what I mean? So by him just going, well, which means like, some of them will get in, some of them won't. You know what I mean? So let's go on with their conversation. He also asked him about aliens. And he's like, well, not really, no. He's like, there's no, I mean, outside of like maybe organic gases, which was a weird thing. That's, no, not really. What do you want? Like little bug-eyed creatures running around and shit like that? And he's like, no, not really. Which even I'm not buying. But then a young girl comes out of the RV.
Yeah, you want anything from the Piggly Wiggly?
We're all out of bean dip. So, she, like 1/8. Like, I don't know if I didn't want to call her a skank, but like she comes out, she's a little trailer trashy.
But she's definitely local. Like he didn't pick her up in New York. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, she's along the Southern Belt, as we'll call it for this. Yeah,
he's definitely sampling the local flavor.
You're fucking bad. You're bad. No, but you're right though. But that's actually what's going on. He's some local hospitality. So they're like, no, we're good. We'll be all right. And Jesse then says, like, is my dad in heaven? And God does his dance around it. But yeah, he's there. He's in heaven, even though you prayed for him like crazy. And so Jesse gets the one thing he needed to know out of God before this all goes sour. And once Jesse knows that, then Jesse's like, okay, now you've got nothing else I need. But God goes into the, I love you, Jesse. I am a loving God. I just need you to say it back. I just need to hear you say it. As if this is some kind of part of the mechanics of, getting forgiveness, I guess, or getting Jesse to like give over. You know what I mean? Even though God can probably tell, like if he says that, he's probably not going to mean it. But Jesse kind of waffles a little bit, I think, up until like a certain point, like, until God took his eyeball, basically, I think he was willing to give over. He probably was willing to give over. But then Jesse flips it, Jesse's like, but maybe we just need, what we need is a better God, somebody without a needy fuck. You're a needy bitch. We don't need you around. And then Jesse starts tossing him around the lot.
Yeah.
And God basically then at one point says to him, like, well, you only do this to me because you have the power. You have the Genesis inside you. And Jesse tells it to be free.
Yeah. I was surprised by what happened next.
Yeah.
Because I kind of expected Genesis to go try and find another host and start exploding people.
Yeah.
Like, I really expected it to go back to the beginning of season 1 where it was like, you know, and maybe they just ran out of budget and they only wanted to kill, like, famous people with Genesis. So they were like, well, let's let it actually be free because we can't afford to get any celebs to come in and blow them up. But, like, I kind of expected it to try a few more hosts.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we'll jump ahead a little bit, but we do see it flying around still in the sky at a certain point, so we know that it's not, hasn't found anybody, or at least it's staying close to Jesse, I guess, in case it's ever like, oh yeah, you come back. In the comic, Jesse gets killed again, and that's how Genesis gets released.
Set free. Yeah,
that's how it gets free, and it's like, giant baby face in the sky, kind of thing. So with that, back to this. So Jesse's like tossing them all around. He gets rid of Genesis, and then he punches God in the face, and that's when God starts to snap, and he's like, "I will rend you asunder," basically. I'm going to tear you from limb to limb. And Jesse's like, I still won't love you then. That's not going to make me, that's not going to help. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
God's like, you know what? You're right. You're right. But I am a loving God. And Jesse's like, nah. You know what? Because God goes into, a little bit of, I've got other plans, if this doesn't work out. And Jesse's like, if you got a better plan than humanity, we'll go for it. And Jesse walks away.
Yep.
And God lets him. And God gets kind of shown up. And then goes into the RV where his little creatures are all in cages. And he kind of loses his shit in there.
Yeah.
And starts killing his little creatures. We don't see them really.
But they are all saying, like, we love you.
I love you, Daddy. Daddy, love you. Daddy, we love you. We love you, Daddy. Daddy.
My favorite part about that whole scene is there's one voice that's using we.
Right.
Everybody else is like, I love you. I love you. There's like one, like, kiss ass who's like, no, we love you.
Yeah, we love you. And so with that, we cut to Jesus, because we're just going to get a little touch on where he's at in the world at this point, this 2-year jump. And he's just kind of working at the paint department at like a Home Depot or a Lowe's.
Yeah.
He's helping out a guy who's saying that the color's not right of this paint. And Jesus is like, look, you got to put it in this space. You got to put it, once it's in there, if you don't like it, you got 90 days to bring it back and we'll refund you or whatever. And he's like, oh, I didn't know there was 90. I'm sorry that I was getting so aggressive with you, And I guess it's the power of Jesus' soothing voice,
Must be.
But the daughter of this guy has a T-shirt.
Yes.
And the T-shirt has ours face's face, and it says Eugene in like Gothic letters, and world tour. Not quite. I wanted the T-shirt that I have because it's on one of the covers, the Glenn Fabry art. Like there is a logo kind of thing for his face that they've made, where it's just like a play on the smiley face. But it's got like it's got like an asterisk where the mouth should be, and the eye is kind of like goofed up. One of them anyway, and so like, I was like, oh man, that's really what the shirt should. But it wouldn't sell it as well. You know what I mean?
No, because people this at least is a nod for the people that have only watched the show.
Yeah, and the fact that it says World Tour on it, it kind of says a lot just by being there.
Except I wanted to see it.
Yeah, me too. So with that, that's pretty much how that ends. The girl's got the Eugene shirt. We cut to Star. We get a follow-up on him. He's on a golf course and basically, being a dick or whatever. And the cop from Pensacola rolls up.
Yeah.
And he's like, I found you, Star. We finally found you. You're under arrest or some shit. And Star starts running. And it's a whole kind of it's a little bit of the goofy, I'm running from a golf cart thing. But then a cop tackles him. And Star is belly to the ground and starts wanking.
Yep.
Starts wanking it. And then that gets the cop off of him. And the other cop, the female officer in uniform, was like, oh, he's jerking off. He's like, no, I know, it's crazy. And then they realize that, oh, shit, he's got my gun. And then he shoots the both of them.
Yep.
And so Star goes back to his game.
He does.
Golf game. He's pretty good, I guess. He really knows how to read the green. I don't know anything about golf, but I feel like that's a good phrase.
That it is.
And
well done.
Thank you.
You should give yourself a bell for that.
No, I can't do that.
It's
that's
a sports reference.
Yeah, I know that it's big for me on a personal level,
Okay.
but I feel like the bell is sacred.
All right.
The bell is sacred. If I had another sound effect on here that might, no, nothing really kind of matching up. All right.
Okay.
But
we do see them, I think we come back to them, but we can do this now, because we go away from Star, and then we come back, and he's doing a putt, and the shot is up from the bunker where he has stuffed the two cops.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, are the people he's golfing with, minions? Are they fellow Grail, just out? Because then...
They don't
First
care.
of all,
yeah.
They don't move a muscle when they see the cop.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly Star would not be the one to bury the bodies, is my other thinking.
Right.
Right? So that caddy probably got a bigger tip at the end of this round. But, they must have helped.
I feel at the least, I mean, they look like they're... I kind of took it as they're probably shady on some level. They obviously don't give a shit, and they really didn't bury him. They kind of just rolled him over into the sand pit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not even like they did much at all. No one's giving a fuck. I don't know who owns that golf course, but that guy doesn't care. Or they're not worried about him. Maybe he's in their pocket too. So then
it's a funny line too, because he's like, I really like this golf thing or whatever, and it's okay. And that's it for Star.
Yeah, so...
He gets away with it.
Star doesn't die, and for that, I'm giving him a buzzer. I'm giving him a buzzer because that dude should have died cathartically for somebody.
You know what?
Ultimately, he serves no purpose after he kills Featherstone. He just sneaks away, and we don't see him again until now. And he doesn't get any closure of his own. He just gets away. He somehow, this guy, of all the characters, to survive.
And what's worse is God kept his promise. So it's not like he survived, but without a dick and without an eye and with a penis head. He gets to go back to his beautiful self and survive.
Mm-hmm. He won the most out of everybody. Now that you think about it, somehow he came out on top.
Yeah,
he gets the best fucking story out of this. How is that right? It's such a miss. It's such a miss for. I mean,
it's not even just the book. It's not even just the source material. Just from a story perspective.
Yeah.
How do you let? Although I'm saying that, and I don't want to get too political, but bad guys tend to be winning a little bit more these days.
Well, here's the thing.
So, maybe it's a commentary on, we let the bad guy go.
Maybe it's a little bit of that. I feel like, but for all the things to go out of their way to land from the book in the show. Yeah. We picked the Alamo. We didn't have to. Could have been anywhere. We picked it out of being faithful to the book that, okay, a scene takes place here. It's a different fucking scene. In the book, it's a big final confrontation with a bunch of different people. And here, it's just a conversation. But we still get it as a nod. And then, the one thing that doesn't happen on that golf course, which usually happens in movies and TV shows like this, is the guy that should get whacked gets whacked. But instead, he gets to kill 2 cops and go on about his life.
And sink the putt.
And sink the putt, and probably reaping whatever rewards he can weasel out of his time as the guy from the Grail. Like, what I mean? He's still probably in all those circles. Now, when you mentioned at the beginning of this that there's an article out there that talks about, what if there was a 5th season? Maybe that's why he's not dead, like, in a way, where, like, that's what that person is kind of leading towards, where, like, that's a door that's open still. That's a guy who needs a comeuppance, but it doesn't work. It doesn't need to be
but
done.
at the end of this, there's no, well, I mean, I guess there is, because we flash forward again, but there isn't, and it's harder to care about characters when you know ultimately what, it's why, like, prequels don't do as well.
Yeah. We'll jump back to this a little bit. So basically, we catch up with God. He's back in heaven, and the Saint of Killers was there waiting for him the whole time.
Yep.
As happens in the book, it's quite a different exchange than in the book, but it hits some points.
And there's a bunch of dead angels, so that's a bell.
We get a bell for that. We get a bell that covers the whole scene, basically.
Okay.
Because Saint of Killers does end up killing God, and that deserves a bell. I
really wonder, like, from a non-book reader perspective, how the will they or won't they would have, or will he or won't he shoot him goes, because, like, I was like, well, when's he going to shoot him? Like for the book reader, it's a when, and you're like, well, you're just dragging it out. I wonder how it plays for somebody who doesn't know and is like the if, not the when.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I wonder how that scene works, because it felt like for the people that were waiting for it to happen, there were a couple extra beats that they were just playing with you on.
A little bit, yeah. Like,
when?
Right. They're kind of holding it out, and then God's playing with the little lightning in his fingers, and it's like, is he going to get the comeuppance? How is this going to go down differently? And it really doesn't, in a way. It's like they have an exchange. It's, it's all comes down to, like, you fucked me, but you fucked me, like, really good. So even though you could give me everything back, it's still not going to take away the fact that you did do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it still happened, So he shoots him and then takes his seat. And then, like, almost to the panel itself, sits down.
The pose.
Sits down and takes a load off. He finally rests. And that is the last we see of him. So we cut back to, this is the scene with Jesse, Tulip, and the baby. They're at the drive-in. They're watching John Wayne in the Alamo.
And that's a bell, because we finally really get to see the Duke.
Finally get to see the Duke, hear the Duke. I think that movie in particular is actually referenced outright in the book long before we get to the actual Alamo in the book. You know what I mean? So, great just for that alone, even though this particular scene doesn't ever happen. But them going to the drive-in with the baby. And I don't think there's any drive-ins left. There might be one. There might be, like, revivalist kind of drive-ins, which
I've got 2 within 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
I think you're lying. I think you're making it up.
No,
I don't think you should.
We are recording this at the end of summer 2019. Right. Both of them were still open.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
Keep your eyes out for one near you playing the Alamo.
They play new movies.
No, I'm sure they do.
It's the weird, like, but they're sidetrack real quick. It's always a kid movie and an adult movie, and I don't know how anybody goes to see the double feature, because you're hoping your kids fall asleep during the Disney one and aren't awake for the rated R one, or you have to leave, or you have to go and sit through the kids movie you don't care about to watch the rated R movie. Like, I'm still really confused by the business model, really.
Fair enough. It's a good point, though. So that scene kind of ends with Genesis flying by overhead.
Yep.
just hovering, I
Because,
guess, keeping
why not?
just keeping an eye out. But then we really fast forward,
Yes.
which was a real 40 years, and we are looking at the tombstones of Jesse and Tulip. Jesse dies in 2065. Tulip dies in 2064. A year before
Leading you to
him.
believe that Jesse kind of basically dies of a broken heart, which is
Yeah.
the closest we're ever going to get to him riding up
on the horse.
on the
Right.
horse.
Right.
Is like reading into it that he died of a broken heart, which is
Yeah.
disappointing.
Yeah.
Sarah, Mike Dolan says you never got
Yeah.
the sunset.
Never got the sunset ride off. Like, I understand why that article would be like, oh, you could do a season 5. It's like, yeah, there's stuff left out. You probably could, because now we know that there's a time period where we have a definitive end, and we could still do chapters in there, but it's not going to happen.
No.
So Cassidy is at the graves with the daughter, who does not get named, if I'm correct. I don't think she ever got named.
I don't think she ever really gets named.
No. They might have a name for her, like in the credits or the IMDb, but I don't think it's said out loud. Why don't you look on the IMDb for the episode and see if maybe there's a listing for that. As I'm taking us through this a little bit. So her and Cassidy kind of just, they talk it up. Her daddy told stories about Cassidy and, did you really drink gasoline? No, but, it was engine coolant, this kind of stuff. Mom loved you.
I enjoyed that little bit, though.
Yeah.
Like that little...
Yeah.
Like Jesse was embellishing, and no, I'll tell you the truth.
Yeah. And, well, the funny thing is, I forget what it is, but it's like, oh, I heard you drank gasoline and did this other crazy thing. And he's like, no, that's not true. It was engine coolant. Like, so the crazy other thing did happen. I forget what it was, but the more outlandish thing. So Daddy and Mom loved you. And he's like, I've been alive for 150 years. She shot me in the chest. It still hurts. Twice. It still hurts. But basically, he's like, I'm going to go eventually. Because they had their little exchange. She's like a banker or some shit and all this kinds of stuff. Will I ever see you again? And he's like, oh, Jesus, I hope so. But then he walks off into the sun. And Sweet Thing from Van Morrison plays. And that's the end of the series.
There is no name. She doesn't. In fact, Ruth Nega doesn't even get credited with anything other than Tulip.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's fair. Unless they also named her Tulip.
Oh, that's possible. But yeah, that's it. That's the series. That's the show. That's it. It's a wrap. All this time. I guess what we can do now is open up that email you sent.
Yeah, because I feel like this is the part where I'm glad I kind of have answers if we haven't already answered these questions. Because I was like, Bill answer these.
Yeah, he'll probably get to them already. Okay, this starts out, on the fax machine. Last episode, who in the hell still has fax machines anymore? It's not that Star has issues sending, but there are like 12 working fax machines left in the world that are still hooked up. Hey, man, what's surprising to me is the fax machine at my job still gets junk mail faxes. Not as much as it used to.
Like menus and stuff?
Menus once in a while from a new place, but we get menus from a couple of places that we do order lunch from that we did give the number to. Okay. And we'll get like roofing. Because we must be listed we might be listed as a business somewhere, but it's always like some different roofing companies and printers, like business cards, T-shirts, this, that, the other thing. But that's it. Just those two.
So you would be one of the places, one of those 12 that would get the
And if you saw my business, the business I work at, you'd be like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. This looks antiquated as fuck. You know what I mean? I still have a CRT monitor. I'm still getting low yield radiation every day.
I mean, I work in IT now. I see plenty of CRT monitors.
Well,
there's a lot of people that are like, my computer still takes VGA. Great. This 50-pound behemoth is not going anywhere.
Great. Flat screens. Ew. Well, the greatest thing is that like there's two stations like when you come into the place. So you see like one has that old school monitor, the other one's got the flat screen, so that it just amplifies the question even more from people like, "Why are you working on it?" I'm like, "Well, look what I'm writing on. It looks like the Matrix code. Like it's a homemade program. It's
Still black with the green.
Mm-hmm. It's black background, green text. It's a homemade IBM fucking program. Back to you.
Yes.
But anyway, Bill, now that that's over, here's some questions. What are some things from the comics that you most wanted to see on the show? Let me just go through the list then. What are some changes you did like? Did you ever come around on the changes you didn't like in season 1? All right, so first questions first, that you most wanted to see on the show. What were some of those things? I feel like I got to see quite a bit of them. I feel like what really was important to me that I felt like in a truncated show like we were getting was to kind of meet Jesse's mom. So as far as like, this is going to be more like what I didn't see that I did want really bad. And I wanted the counting sand bit. I felt like that was important.
And Rockstar Arseface would have been great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one. Actually, for me, the two are literally, I wanted to see Eugene on a stage with a band. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to see Sheriff Jesse.
Yeah.
I know we were never going to like go down that full path. Yeah. But if he could have been wearing a badge when he showed up to see like, you know, or like still had his work badge on when they were at the drive-in, like, so I don't even need to see all of it. Just hint at it, because that was a huge. Yeah. Okay, we're not gonna do this.
Yeah. Like, but they could have done their version of it, which would have been like you didn't have to do the Rodriguez brothers again. I'm like, God damn it, with the Rodriguez brothers. But like you said, that's a great idea. Like Jesse comes home and has the sheriff badge on.
That's it. That's all I need.
And he's got the dog with him.
Yeah.
And it's even better because it's like, oh, Tulip's here. I'd be like, oh my God, this is great. I bet you wherever they are, his mom's like somewhere, and he's gonna end up running into her. That would have been leading me somewhere towards even liking it. But yeah. The sheriff stuff wasn't as high on my list, but it's definitely in there. I would have in this day and age, the fact that he didn't take on the Klan, because that's part of that storyline too, the Salvation storyline.
Yep, that's true.
But the fact that they didn't have any Klan in there, because the Grail ends up being the one and only kind of bad guy once we leave the town in the beginning of season 1. You know what I mean? Once we get out of there, like the Grail is the premier kind of, that's where our bad guys come from type thing. These small
we got
Hitler.
I feel like that's that. I mean, but you know what I mean? Like that. I think I don't know if. I think someone in the writer's room later on was like, all right, so when do we do the Klan? And somebody else was like, we've already got Hitler.
Yeah.
Like,
but in the books, the whole thing that I like about the Klan stuff is that, granted, like in some of the bumblingness of the Klan in the books is kind of like would be felt as to be reminiscent of Django Unchained, because there's a little bit of bunglingness with that Klan at a certain point. Or there's a bit anyway in Django Unchained with the hoods.
Yeah.
But you know, I wouldn't mind seeing him do that, because it's a great dressing down scene where he just basically calls them all out on their bullshit, and, you know, how come, you know, only these people who do the shit you do look like you kind of shit. You know, they had no chin. I think I had literally no chin.
That's part of it. But I feel like the other part of it is look at the political climate. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Trump's not the best speaker in the world. No. So some of that stuff ripped from the headlines ruins what you can do on this show.
It does
for shock
all this,
value.
Yeah, it does
a little bit.
Well,
not a lot of it,
but it does start to raise that conversation in the writers' room. Do we do this thing? Does it get misread as this kind of a thing? So do we bother? Do we have to? Should we? What are we really saying if we do it? So I'm sure all of these aspects were considered and balanced and dismissed for one reason or another, but that was something I kind of wanted to see. And there was something else that you had me thinking about. The The thing with the sand, as far as like small bits. Funny bits.
that would have been great.
I knew the sex detectives was never really going to happen. Kind of glad for that.
We never got to see anybody really fuck themselves.
And yeah, and we got like this fucking half-ass version of that kind of.
Yeah.
In season 1, which was like, once they didn't do that, I was kind of really nervous for the show in the long term. Like I was like, oh, are these guys going to pull punches on all that kind of stuff? And therefore, it started to amaze me more and more the things that they would do versus the things they wouldn't do. And here's the pattern I started to notice. If it's an original idea that they came up with that kind of is over the top, it's in there for sure. If it's like an over the top idea from the comics, it's kind of like tweaked or retrofit. You know what I mean? Or sometimes even like just watered down completely. And it was like, they kind of like their own stuff a little bit more.
Yeah, I was going to say, so are there any changes that you did like? Like, did you and I guess it's kind of similar to the third, which is like where some of the things in season 1, did you ever come around on? Like,
yeah,
did you ever get to, I mean, I guess the biggest one would be, did you turn around on Tulip? Because, I mean, if anybody's still listening from season 1, you and Dom and Bob, like, it wasn't just that she wasn't blonde.
Yeah.
It was that the character was different.
And that they had changed their the dynamic of their relationship and how they knew each other. And not only that, but, like, her personality. By giving her because she was much more over the top and barky in the first seasons. And I'm not saying, a confident, strong, assertive woman is a bad thing, because I like that shit. But
that's not how she was written.
No, she was written really, or at least the choices in delivery were decided that she's going to be like fucking like just bossy, not part of the team.
Well,
just,
and she grows into a confidence because she goes to her friend to learn how to shoot like at a certain point in like the second book, I think. Like she's not this badass out of the gate.
Well, and I also thought we would get some because here's another thing too. Like they talked about building her up because she got slighted a little bit as a character in the book, which is fine and fair. But she also got slighted a little bit here in the show because who gets flashbacks? The men. The men both got flashbacks.
Well, we did get back. We did go to her father in the apartment. Like,
oh, that's true. They did the whole black box.
You're right to forget because it's like her one flashback outside of flashbacks of her and Jesse as kids.
Right.
The rest of them, I mean, the follow, and then the follow up is this is what you've probably forgot from the first question. We never got New York with Cassidy.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is
yes. For
the comic readers, that was huge.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole turn of Cassidy. I mean, look, and the turn of Cassidy in the comics is like a protracted thing. Because Jesse gets like a huge download of information from like a homeless woman who knew him back in the days, and it's at least an issue long, maybe like 2, and then like there's like an issue long scene where Jesse beats the shit out of him in front of the Alamo, and it's like this thing where like he deserves it and he knows it, and he takes it, and and Jesse can't stop, and Jesse's like completely in the right basically, and it's definitely one of those things that overall I get why they wanted to make him more likable for the long stretch of it, but would have been interesting for them to find a way for them to give him some redemption, because in the end he gets a little bit in the comic, but he doesn't get like a true like redemption arc like we think of them nowadays. Like
he's probably got the most comic book ending though. Redemption aside, the walking off and just is the most comic book. I will say now that I've been flashing back to like the like highlight parts of the comics.
Mm-hmm.
We never got like the Vietnam vet who knew Jesse's dad, and you could have fast forward, you could have fit that into whatever narrative and whatever war you wanted it to be.
Yeah, we could have pushed it up the timeline. I know what you're saying, yeah.
But that was influential because that's also where Jesse gets the lighter, right?
Yeah,
like because he gets that from his dad's friend, actually. I think, and it's like a flashback or something. But that, I don't know.
We get the origin of the lighter. That's how that works. He's got the letter already. We know it's his daddy's, but we finally get the origin that they got it from John Wayne himself.
Yes,
that John Wayne came to their platoon and gave them out to everybody. But we also get some backstory, some dad adventure. Because that's the other thing, too. The comic book is running forever. It's like, we've got time to do all this kind of stuff, As far as the last question, did you ever come around on the changes from season 1? The people in the town, like, although my problem with season 1 is that it just went on too long in the town. I feel like that should have been like half season. Like, I feel like my thing is that the show...
We got to hit the road.
Yeah, I feel like this show should have done half seasons, and that's when the locations should have changed. Every half season. But I do like some of those storylines and those people, to a degree. I can't remember his name, with a D. The dad of the kid. Jesse breaks his arm, in the first or second episode.
Yeah.
That dude's cool. He's over on Future Man now. He's great. I like that guy. So as far as I come around on any of those changes, it's hard because it's not so much changes as additions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But otherwise we weren't looking back on it. Otherwise we were never going to get any Quincannon. So to get Quincannon, to get what's his name playing him, overall I've come back around on it a little bit. But I wasn't completely hating it in the beginning. I was just
confused. I think confused
and I was just
because you're not sure.
Yeah, and I was just anxious to get the story going. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, I get what we're doing here, but I know that the stories I want are a season away. It was hard to sit through because of that. Not so much what they were doing all the time, but I think if my one thing that I've always wrestled with the show is the tone, and I come and go with it because the tone. It
never
comes
really
and goes.
Picked one. Yeah, it didn't pick like there's a part of me that wants to say if this show had picked camp, it would have been a much better show because they would have been able to get away with more. But because they didn't pick camp, they just picked moments to be camp.
Yeah.
They have to watch what they're doing because you're not a camp show.
Yeah.
And if you make that determination and that decision early on, you could probably push a few more boundaries because, that show's just being camp.
Yeah, I mean, I would have hated it, but I get what you're saying. It's like, like they were trying to do the thing that the book does because the book does do some of that. But the split is different. Like on the show, it's like 60-40. It's like, it's 60% straight, 40% camp. Or craziness, and then in the book it's like 80-20, you know what I mean, or it's like 10-90, you know what I mean, where it's like it's punctuated by sometimes when someone gets killed it's a goofy situation, and then most of the goofy or jokiness actually comes at the expense of Air Star, and the bodily fucking shit that happens to him less often,
Yeah, I don't know. The only other, I mean, it just flashed. Apparently my memory's coming back to me for reading the book. Like, we never got the saint mowing people down in like a stairway hallway scenario where the bodies pile up and pile up and pile up like that. And it's not that it didn't happen in Masada, because the show was very good at moving some things around. It's that we never got him mowing down hundreds of Grail members.
You would
which
think,
would have been great. Like,
I mean, I can picture it easily.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can picture it easily, even if it's not in a stairwell. Like him just shooting and shooting and shooting, and these guys just keep coming in. But, you know, he would have exhausted all their soldiers, I guess. You know what I mean? From a storytelling standpoint, it's like, well, you know.
How do they have anybody the next episode? Like, how are there any Grail members left?
Yeah. And meanwhile, like, you know, the show doesn't ever put a finger or a point on how big this army or organization really is. It seems limitless because it's just always there, you know.
So, Bill, I think anybody that has listened from the beginning would agree that you probably would grade the graphic novels, the comics, as like an A plus, right? Yeah. It's why you started this podcast to begin with. So the television series, like final grade, like we've talked about what they didn't do, what they did, what they changed. That's been the whole conversation, more or less. So grade the television show overall.
It's hard to grade it on its own without saying caveats, you know, that kind of a thing. I feel like I want to say it's on its own, like as if I didn't know the books, I'd probably give it like a B or B plus, you know what I mean? That kind of a thing. And I feel like that's kind of right. I'd probably lean more towards like, you know, C plus B, only because like I know what the books had in them. You know what I mean? I wouldn't call it an A because season 1 is kind of clunky on its own. Like even people who didn't know the books were like, what's like the execution? Yeah. The execution on everything in season 1 was kind of rough and weird, and it felt very amateurish. Like it almost felt like none of these people knew how to run a show or something, or whatever it was trying to do. It wasn't really quite landing. But that's a season 1 problem for a lot of shows. You know what I mean? And so for a show that wanted to be faithful to a thing but was allowing itself to make up new stuff, you know what I mean? They were trying to spin a lot of plates. I get it. So as overall, like all 4 seasons, doing the whole series, I'm going to say B. You know, there's some great stuff in there. I think it does stand on its own enough. I think what I'll give it is, you know, there are bonus points in that because of the balls of them to do certain things that they did do. As much as I don't like necessarily Hitler being folded into the story because it's not in the books, I have no problem with Hitler being brought in as a character for a show like this. So I think that's kind of gutsy. They went there, like Jesus isn't in the books, but they brought him into the show. You know, it's a change. It kind of works a little bit. It makes a little bit more sense to bringing Hitler into me. And, you know, I didn't mind that change. So, like, it's like, you know, it's this thing where, like, for all the pluses and minuses, it keeps kind of hovering at a B for me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I think about this, that feels like it wants to take it down. But I think about this, it pushes it back up. But it never really kind of gets past that, you know? And like I said, if I'm really critically looking at it as a comparison to the book, then I'm going to say it's like a C plus because we didn't get to certain things. I don't feel like Jesse really gets to be the dominating character as much as it's a trio in the book. There's a certain amount of like Jesse's our barometer for the righteousness, you know, the righteous indignation, the speechifying stuff. I get it. A lot of that shit gets boring on TV, and we really wanted to juggle more of a trio here. But, you know, it does at times feel like he's almost a guest in his own show. You know, like when he finally is on that stage in this episode and giving out his little speech or whatever to the people about, like, you know, not finding God. I'm like, oh, Jesse's finally going to get a moment to shine because it's like the finale and this is his only, and that's the only spot that he really gets to do anything close to that, you know? And not that everybody needs that necessarily, but, you know, you just kind of like, finales tend to do those kinds of things. So that's what I thought we were going to get. And then it's a brief kind of thing. But that's how I see it. What about you? as far as like, giving it a grade?
I think it ends up with a C. It's like a solid C plus, and I feel like the reason it's lower for me is the change in relationships because of the story plot points they changed the dynamic. So they made it impossible for Sarah to get her Jesse riding on a horse and coming up to Tulip because there was
Sarah
just
Nestle,
that was not the relationship they had. And they made it impossible for the reconciliation in the final episode of like Jesse and Cassidy and Tulip because there was never the like Tulip and Cassidy fucked a couple times. There was never a relationship like there was in the comics. So like because they changed those dynamics so much, there were things they couldn't do. Yeah. And I feel like just paging through the last volume again, it hits you that while this was some social commentary, especially from a comic perspective, this was about those characters and their development is stunted by all the decisions they made. I care a little bit less about Cassidy and Tulip and Jesse in the show than I ended up in the comics. Yeah. And it's just based on the decisions they made, and characters are important. Like, they spend a little too much time on a few extra things. You know, you said it well, like, the plus and minus of what they subtracted versus what they added didn't do anything except that all of those pluses and minuses were for like secondary things. And I feel like the primary characters and the primary plot lines kind of lost out a bit. So I'm not quite as invested in them as you were. And I understand it's a different medium. Yeah. But I think anybody who's watched the entire show now and read the comics, you're not feeling the same way about the characters, and you shouldn't feel less about them just because they made a few little changes here and there. And that's why solid C plus, but I don't think I could even take it to that B minus range.
All right. I don't blame you. I think you got some valid points here. I think I agree with all of them. You know what I mean? It's all a personal barometer. It's all fucking subjective. Yeah. It's art. But what I should say at this point is some thank yous for people up first, listeners who are still listening, who have been here for the long haul, and I don't know you because you never reached out. Thank you anyway for listening. It would have been nice to hear from you, but that's okay. I want to thank you and any new listeners, people who drifted in and out. I want to thank Agent Palmer, but we'll get to you in the end. I want to thank Edward O'Hare. I want to thank Stephanie Muniz. I want to thank Sarah Netzley. I want to thank my brother Bob and Dominic and anybody else. We had a couple other people pop in here, I think. And everybody really for, checking it out and giving us a shot. I do know that I would presume that in the scheme of preacher-related podcasts to listen to, I'm sure this one was a challenge quite often, especially in those earlier episodes, those early seasons. Hey, it was rough for me too. Okay, secrets revealed. I was having a hard time behind the mic during those days. Really fucking hard. So if you want to go back and relive that trauma, those episodes will be up forever. Well, yeah, probably for a long, long time anyway. But anything else I should get to before I play the music?
I think that's it. I mean, I guess on behalf of the listeners and all of your guests, I mean, thank you, Bill.
Oh, don't do
I mean,
that.
this could have been a truncated 15-minute segment on the Wicked Theory podcast, during the season, and you split it out and you gave us a community of sorts to at least converse with and live tweet with during the shows and stuff. And so for that, thank you, because like without you, it's just, a
all right.
You don't like comments. I get
well,
it. But,
you know,
but somebody needs to thank you.
Thank
all
you.
right?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I did that.
All right. Thank you. No, yeah, I appreciate all that. And I do, again, to you in particular, thanks for coming through and always helping out and trying to help out. Meaning when I would be like, yeah, right, behind the scenes. Thank you for your time and coming in here and being another voice in the crowd. I'm gonna cue up the music here for the outro.
One final time.
For one final time, and don't really know how to.
Why not me?
End this one. You know, it is the last one. The future is a mystery, I guess. The Wicked Theory podcast is coming back is what I'm getting at. Just keep your eyes peeled in October. Maybe I'll put something on this feed, a little sampler or something like that. If anybody wants to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/Wicked Theory. Over there, you can find Ed Bonds with Bill. That's an ongoing special podcast I do with Ed O'Hare, who you've heard here, and he forces me to watch James Bond movies because I was never big on them. And am I enjoying myself? I don't know, but he does offer me cookies. That is part of the gag, the bit. Sometimes
are they related? Like, did you get like Butterfingers for Goldfinger?
Well, no, but if I can figure out what the movie, which Bond, if I can figure out which Bond we're gonna watch, I get to get the cookies that he's brought over.
Otherwise, you have to watch him eat them.
Yeah. Otherwise, he takes them with him. Yeah.
Oh.
And
wow.
I like a good sweet snack while I watch James Bond.
That's high stakes.
It's high stakes. You can listen to the one where he came over and he cooked me dinner. Yes, that happens in one of them. I won't tell you which one, but I was blown away by the lamb. I really was. Folks, thank you so much for listening, for hanging out, for spending your time with me for this. Seriously, keep an eye peeled for Wicked Theory, the Wicked Theory podcast. It is coming back. Not sure exactly what the format's going to be, but it is coming back. So, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? You can check out Agent Palmer at agentpalmer.com. You can check out his podcast, The Palmer Files. I'm the guest on the first episode. It'd be really cool if you guys did that, see what we're talking about over there. If you don't like it, go listen to the next episode where he's talking to somebody else. If you don't like that one, listen to the next episode where he's talking to another person. Because that's what you do. You talk to people.
New people.
Every episode.
I
love it. All right, folks. It's been a pleasure. I would love to say until the end of the world as the sign-off. But this is the end. So, goodbye. Say goodbye, Palmer.
Goodbye, Palmer.